Welcome to the English Listening Practice Podcast.
In today's episode, we're going to unlock the secrets of learning English.
We'll share some powerful truths that will completely change how you learn.
This information is incredibly useful, so make sure you listen all the way to the end. It will really help you on your English journey.
Have you ever felt this way? You've studied English for years. You can read an article or watch a movie with subtitles. But when someone asks you a simple question, your mind goes blank. Or maybe you know a grammar rule perfectly. You could even pass a test on it. But when you talk, you make the same mistake again and again. You feel stuck, like you're not making any progress. If this sounds like you, I want you to know two things. First, you are not alone. And second, this feeling is not failure. It's a normal and solvable part of learning a language.
Today, we're going to look inside your brain. We will explore how it learns a new language. Our guide will be the ideas from a famous book, Second Language Acquisition by Rod Ellis. But don't worry, this won't be a boring lecture. Think of this as the secret user manual for your language learning brain. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why you feel stuck. And you'll have new tools to change it.
First, we need to change how you see your own language skills. We're going to stop using the idea of bad English. We'll replace it with a more powerful and accurate idea, your own personal language system. This is a key concept for everything we will talk about today. Understanding this is the first step to a better way of learning.
Let's talk about a term called Interlanguage. A linguist named Larry Salinker created this term in the 1970s. It's a revolutionary idea because it changes how we think about learning a new language. Before, people thought a learner's English was just a broken version of the real language. But interlanguage theory says your speech is not just random mistakes. It's your own unique language system with its own rules. It's a transitional language. It's a mix that is between your native language and English. It has parts of both languages, but also its own special features. Every single person learning a second language has an interlanguage. It's a necessary part of the learning process.
Let's use a technology analogy to understand interlanguage. Imagine your interlanguage is like software in beta testing. It's not the final version that a native speaker uses. But it's not a crashed computer either. It's a program that works. It has its own logic and its own rules. It can do many things well. But like any beta software, it has bugs. These bugs are your mistakes. So, your mistakes are not failures. They are just bugs in the current version of your language software. And these bugs can be found, understood, and fixed.
Your interlanguage has three main characteristics. First, your interlanguage is systematic. This is a very important idea. The mistakes you make are not random. They are predictable because they come from the current rules of your internal system. For example, a native Spanish speaker might say, "I have 30 years," instead of, "I am 30 years old." This is not a careless mistake. They are using a rule from Spanish, tengo 30 años, and applying it to English. Another example is saying, "He no go," instead of he doesn't go. You have created a simple rule. To make a verb negative, put no in front of it. It's an efficient rule. It just isn't the rule native English speakers use. Understanding that your language has its own system is the first step to changing it.
Second, your interlanguage is dynamic. This means it's always changing and evolving. This explains why your performance changes so much from day to day. Have you ever had a day where your English felt amazing? And the next day, you could barely speak? That is your dynamic interlanguage at work. Your brain is not getting worse. It's reorganizing itself like a computer defragmenting its hard drive. It's processing new information and testing new rules. This process can be messy and slow things down sometimes. This is a sign of active learning, not a sign of going backward.
Third, your interlanguage is permeable. This means it is open to influence and can be changed. Can be influenced from the outside by the language you hear and read. Researchers call this input. It can also be influenced from the inside when you think about rules. This openness is what makes learning possible. When you hear a native speaker say, he doesn't go many times, that new information enters your system. Creates a conflict with your he no go rule. Your brain then has to reevaluate and update its rule. This is the most hopeful part. Your language system is built to change based on new evidence.
When you understand these three features, your perspective changes. The idea of good English versus bad English disappears. Judging your English often causes shame and frustration. But what if you started analyzing it instead? Instead of saying, my English is bad, you could say something different. You could say, my interlanguage has a rule that creates this result. The correct rule is different. How can I get more information to update my system? This change in thinking is very powerful. It changes your identity from someone who is bad at English to a user of a developing language system. Your goal is now to become a detective of your own language. This shift from shame to curiosity is the key to real, lasting change.
Once you accept you have a unique interlanguage, your view of mistakes changes. They are no longer failures. They become invaluable clues. They are windows into the current rules of your language system. Error analysis is a tool you can use to understand your own brain. Most errors are not random. They come from predictable sources. Understanding these sources is like reading a diagnostic report for your car's engine.
Let's look at the two most common sources of errors. The first is L1 transfer, also known as interference. This is when rules from your first language or L1 affect your English. For example, a native French or Spanish speaker might say, I have a car red. This is because in their language, adjectives often come after the noun. It's a logical use of a pattern they already know. It shows an efficient mind at work, even if the result is wrong in English. This also happens with pronunciation. A native Arabic speaker might say bark instead of park because the P sound doesn't exist in Arabic. These are predictable results of L1 transfer.
The second major source of errors is called overgeneralization. This is actually a very positive sign of learning. It happens when you learn a new English rule and then apply it everywhere. You use it even where there is an exception. For example, a child learns to add s to make words plural. So they say 2 foots or many sheeps. They learn to add ed for the past tense. So they say, I go to the store. These are mistakes, but they are not signs of failure. They show a smart mind that has found a pattern and is using it. The child has learned the rule, but not the exceptions yet. As an adult learner, you do the same thing. This is a sign of progress.
So, what does this mean for you? It means your pattern of errors is a powerful signal. It's your brain's way of telling you exactly where the biggest differences are between your current system and the target language. Your errors are a personalized GPS for your learning journey. They highlight the specific things that need your attention. This leads to a powerful action plan. Instead of fearing your errors, you should start collecting them.
For 1 week, try keeping an error journal. Every time you are corrected or notice a mistake, write it down. Note what you said and what the correct version is. At the end of the week, look at your list. Do you see a pattern? Are your errors related to prepositions like in, on, and at? Is it verb tenses? That pattern is not your weakness. It is your personalized, data-driven study guide. Your brain is telling you exactly what to focus on next. You have just turned a negative feeling into a strategic learning plan.
Now let's talk about the feeling of being stuck on a plateau. You're working hard, but you don't feel like you're getting better. You make the same old mistakes over and over. This is a real experience called fossilization. Fossilization is when certain errors in your interlanguage stop changing. They become a permanent part of your speech. Even with more classes or more effort, these errors don't go away. Research shows that most adult language learners experience this. So if you feel this way, you are not alone.
Why does your learning suddenly stop? The reasons are not about a lack of talent. One of the biggest reasons is called communicative adequacy. This means you stop improving when your English is good enough for your daily needs. You can order coffee, have simple chats, and go shopping. Your message gets across, even if your grammar is not perfect. Once you reach this comfort level, the pressure to improve decreases. For example, a Japanese artist named Wes was a great communicator in English. But his grammar was full of fossilized errors because he didn't need perfect grammar to be understood. His development stopped because his English was good enough.
Another major cause of fossilization is a lack of corrective feedback. If you make a mistake and no one ever corrects you, your brain thinks the form is correct. This is common in social situations where people are too polite to correct you. Internal factors also play a big role. Low motivation or high anxiety can cause fossilization. If you are afraid of making mistakes, you will avoid trying new, complex sentences. This causes your interlanguage to stagnate. All these causes show that fossilization is the natural result of reaching a state of comfort. Your brain decides that the effort to improve is not worth the benefit.
The word fossilization sounds permanent, like a dinosaur bone in stone. but research suggests there is a difference between permanent and temporary fossilization. The plateau you are on is not a dead end. It is a comfortable resting spot. You can choose to stay there if it meets your needs. But it is not a prison. Your interlanguage can start evolving again if you give it the right stimulus. The question is not, why am I broken? The question is, am I willing to leave this comfortable spot and start climbing again?
How do you actually acquire language? This brings us to a big debate in language learning. In one corner, we have Dr. Stephen Krashen. He believes we acquire language subconsciously by understanding messages. He calls this comprehensible input. For Krashen, it's all about soaking language in. In the other corner, we have Dr. Meryl Swain. She found that students who only listened to French couldn't speak it very well. She concluded that just listening isn't enough. To master a language, you have to be pushed to speak it. For Swain, it's all about pushing language out. Input versus output. Krashen versus Swain. The key is to understand how to combine both.
Let's start with Stephen Krashen's 5 main ideas. First is the acquisition learning hypothesis. Krashen says there are 2 different ways to develop language ability. Acquisition is the subconscious process of picking up a language, like a child. It happens naturally when you focus on the meaning of what you hear or read. Krashen says this leads to real fluency. Learning, on the other hand, is the conscious process of studying grammar rules. It's what you do in a traditional classroom. It gives you knowledge about the language, but it doesn't lead to fluent speech. When you speak English, do you feel what sounds right, or do you think about the grammar rule? That is the difference between acquisition and learning.
Krashen's second idea is the monitor hypothesis. Your conscious grammar rules act like a little editor or monitor in your head. The monitor can check your sentences for errors before you speak. But it only works under 3 conditions. You need time, you need to be focused on being correct, and you must know the rule. This explains why you can write a correct email, but make mistakes in a fast conversation. Krashen's third idea is the natural order hypothesis. He argues that we acquire parts of a language in a predictable, natural order. For example, learners usually acquire ing before they acquire the third person s, like in he walks. This means no matter how much your teacher drills you on a rule, your brain might not be ready for it. If you're struggling with an easy grammar point, it might not be your fault. Your brain is just following its own built-in schedule.
This brings us to Krashen's most important idea, the input hypothesis. How do we learn? Krashen says, we acquire language in only one way, by understanding messages or by receiving comprehensible input. But to make progress, the input must be just one step beyond our current level. He calls this I+1. I is your current level, and +1 is the new language you are ready to learn. Think about lifting weights. You don't get stronger by lifting a feather or trying to lift a car. You get stronger by lifting a weight that is a little challenging, but possible. That is I+1. For language, this means reading or listening to things you mostly understand, but that have a few new words you can guess from the context.
Finally, there is the effective filter hypothesis. Krashen says that emotions like anxiety, low self-esteem, and low motivation can create an imaginary wall or filter. This filter can stop input from reaching the language learning part of your brain. When the effective filter is high, it doesn't matter how good the input is. It won't get in. When the filter is low, the learner is open to the input and learning can happen. This is a very important idea that we will discuss more later.
When you take all 5 of Krashen's ideas together, they create a philosophy of learning. Your main job as a learner is not to study hard. Your main job is to fill your life with interesting and understandable input. Then you should trust your brain to do the hard work for you. This should change your focus from effortful study to strategic consumption. The key question is not what grammar should I study today. It is, how can I find English content that is so interesting that I forget I'm studying? Find a book or a podcast about a topic you love. Watch a movie you already know in English with English subtitles. The goal is to make learning feel more like play and less like work.
Now, Meryl Swain offers a dose of reality. She studied students in French immersion programs in Canada. These students received tons of comprehensible input all day. Their listening and reading skills were fantastic. But their speaking and writing skills were not as good. They still made basic grammar errors. This led Swain to her key idea: input is essential, but it is not enough. To become very accurate, learners also need to be pushed to produce output. In other words, you have to be forced to speak and write. Output is not just practice. It is part of the learning process itself.
Swain identified 3 key functions of producing language. First is the noticing or triggering function. Trying to say something forces you to notice the gaps in your knowledge. Imagine you want to tell a story about last weekend. You want to say, if I had known the party was going to be loud, I wouldn't have gone. You start the sentence and then you freeze. You are not sure how to build that complex sentence. In that moment of struggle, you have noticed a gap in your knowledge. Your brain is now actively looking for the answer. The next time you see or hear that structure, a light will go on in your head. This is a powerful learning trigger that you only get from trying to speak.
The second function is hypothesis testing. Every time you speak, you are testing a hypothesis about how the language works. The feedback you get from your conversation partner is the result of your experiment. For example, you say, I am interested in this movie. Your friend looks confused. You try, I am interested in this movie. They nod and agree. You just did a successful experiment and got data to confirm the correct form. The third function is the metalinguistic or reflective function. Producing output makes you think about the language. For example, you and a friend might discuss whether to use will or going to in an email. This act of discussing the rules helps you understand them better.
So who is right? Krashen input or Swain output? The answer is both of them. The place where their theories meet is in real-time interactive conversation. Conversation is the ultimate laboratory for language acquisition. You are constantly switching between listening, input, and speaking, output. When a helpful partner speaks to you, they naturally simplify their language. This gives you perfect I+1 input. Then, it's your turn to speak, output. What if your partner doesn't understand you? A process called negotiation of meaning begins. Your partner might ask you to rephrase your sentence. This pushes you to improve your output and provides you with clear, targeted input. Live interaction is the fastest way to improve.
Let's talk about the feeling of having two different brains. You have the study brain that knows grammar rules for tests. And you have the conversation brain that forgets all those rules when you speak. This gap is not your fault. It reflects two different types of knowledge, explicit and implicit. Explicit knowledge is your conscious knowledge about a language. You can explain the rule, like add S for the third person singular. This knowledge is slow and requires effort. Implicit knowledge is your unconscious, intuitive knowledge of how to use a language. It's like riding a bike. You can do it, but you can't explain how. It is fast and automatic. It is the basis of fluency. Your speaking problem is really an implicit knowledge gap.
So, can you turn explicit rule knowledge into automatic implicit skill? This is a big debate. Let's use a bicycle analogy. The non-interface position, like crashins, says, no. Reading books about physics will never teach you how to ride a bike. You must get on the bike. The strong interface position says, yes. This is the traditional teaching method. Learn the rule, then practice it until it's automatic. This is like reading the bike manual and practicing each step slowly until it's smooth. The weak interface position says, maybe it can help. Explicit knowledge doesn't become implicit, but it can help you notice the right things. Reading the physics book might make you pay more attention to keeping your speed up when you actually ride. It helps you notice what's important.
The experience of many learners shows that just drilling grammar rules often leads to frustration. The best approach is to focus on building implicit knowledge directly. This requires a big change in your study routine. Here is your action plan. Flip your 80-20th ratio. Many learners spend 80% of their time on explicit study like grammar apps. They spend maybe 20% of their time on real immersion like listening or speaking. You need to flip that ratio. Spend at least 80% of your time on activities that build implicit knowledge. This means massive amounts of reading and listening for pleasure and having real conversations. Use the other 20% for focused, explicit study. You study the rule to help you notice it during your 80% immersion time.
We've talked about processes that apply to everyone. But we all know people learn at different speeds. Why are there so many individual differences? One factor is language aptitude. Research says there is a gift for languages, but it's a mix of specific skills. These include skills like distinguishing new sounds and recognizing grammar patterns. People with higher aptitude might learn faster in classrooms. But aptitude is not the whole story. It affects the rate of learning, but not your final success. Motivation and strategy are often much more important.
A more empowering idea is learning styles. This is about your preferred way of processing information. By understanding your preference, you can choose methods that work with your brain. Let's use the VARK model: visual, oral, read/write, and kinesthetic. Think about this. To learn a new word, what's best for you? Visual learners need to see the word in a sentence, maybe with a picture. Oral learners need to hear it pronounced and repeated out loud. Read/write learners need to write it down with its definition and example sentences. Kinesthetic learners might make a physical flashcard or connect an action to the word.
Let's think about another scenario: learning a complex grammar rule. A visual learner would want a colorful chart or a timeline diagram. An oral learner would want to talk it through with a teacher. A read/write learner would want to read the chapter in a grammar book carefully. A kinesthetic learner would want to immediately use the grammar in a practical role play. Discovering your preference is about empowerment. It gives you strategies to make learning more efficient and enjoyable. You can build a personalized routine that is tailored to you.
If learning styles are your brain's wiring, motivation is the electricity. It's one of the most powerful predictors of success. There are 4 distinct types of motivation. First is instrumental motivation. This is when you learn English as a tool for a practical goal, like getting a promotion or passing a test. Second is integrative motivation. This is the desire to connect with the culture and the people who speak the language. You're not just learning words, you're learning to connect with people.
The third type is resultative motivation. This is motivation that comes from success. The more progress you make, the more motivated you become. It's a positive cycle. Small victories fuel your desire for more. Finally, there is intrinsic motivation. This is learning for the pure joy and satisfaction of the process itself. You do it because you find the language beautiful and the challenge exciting.
Why is it important to know these 4 types? Because the most successful learners don't rely on just one. They have a rich and balanced motivation cocktail. If your only motivation is to pass a test, what happens after the test? Your motivation disappears. You need to add other ingredients to your motivation mix to be resilient. If you're learning for your job, can you also find an English TV series you love? This adds integrative motivation. Can you set a small, achievable weekly goal to get a taste of success? This builds resultative motivation. By diversifying your reasons for learning, you make your motivation stronger.
Finally, let's talk about personality and anxiety. For a long time, people thought only extroverts could be good language learners because they talk more. But this is not true. Introverts have their own superpowers. They are often great listeners and reflective learners. The key is to find strategies that work for your personality. But there is one emotion that destroys language learning for everyone: anxiety. This brings us back to Krashen's effective filter. Negative emotions like anxiety and fear create an invisible wall around your brain. This wall blocks language input from getting in.
Managing your emotional state is a critical skill. You could have the world's best teacher, but if your effective filter is high from anxiety, none of the information will get in. So, how do you lower this wall? First, create psychological safety. See mistakes as part of the process, not failures. Second, prioritize success to build confidence. Start with an easy task. Third, make it fun. Integrate games, music, and topics you love. Fourth, find a supportive community. Practice with patient, non-judgmental people. And finally, control your input. Use material that is challenging but not overwhelming.
We have explored the entire language learning machine. Now, let's bring it all together into actionable principles for smarter learning. Principle 1. Build with both bricks and mortar. Learn formulaic expressions or chunks, like, "How's it going?" These are your bricks for fluency. But also learn grammar rules. This is the mortar that lets you build your own unique sentences. Principle 2. Become a detective and focus on form. While you're reading or listening for pleasure, give yourself a small mission. Pick one grammar feature to look for, like the preposition on. Just noticing it will train your brain to pay attention to details.
Principle 3. Prioritize the feeling. Focus on building fast, automatic, implicit knowledge. Remember the 80-20th split, 80% immersion, 20% explicit study. Principle 4. Respect your brain's timetable. Learners acquire grammar in a predictable, natural order. If you're struggling with a rule, your brain might not be ready. Don't get frustrated. Move on and trust the process. Principle 5 and 6. Fuel the engine and test it. You need massive amounts of comprehensible input and regular opportunities for pushed output. Aim for an 80% input and 20% output balance.
Principle 7. Connect and collaborate. Interaction is where everything comes together. It is the single most powerful activity in language acquisition. Your action plan is to make finding opportunities for real-time interaction your number one priority. Could be a tutor, a language exchange partner, or a conversation group. Schedule it into your week like an important appointment. All other activities, like reading or using apps, are preparation for the main event, using the language to connect with another person.
So where does this leave us? We've learned that your bad English is actually a sophisticated system called an interlanguage. Your mistakes are not failures. They are data points on your personal GPS. The plateau of fossilization is not a prison, but a comfort zone you can choose to leave. We've understood that input and output are essential partners. And we know that managing your emotional state, your effective filter, is the master switch for learning. The most important takeaway is this: you have more power in this process than you think.
Success is not about talent. It's about shifting your mindset from a passive student to an active acquirer. An acquirer is a detective and a strategist, consciously managing their own learning. Your final task is to answer one question. What is the one thing you will change about your learning routine, starting tomorrow?
Will you flip your 80-20 rule? Will you schedule a conversation? Will you start each session by lowering your effective filter?
Choose one thing and start there.
You are no longer learning in the dark. You now have the user manual.
It's time to become the architect of your own fluency.